You're welcome back to the conversation at News Central Television. The first half of the show, we did look at the situation in Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari is tackling governors over the misuse of local government funds. It's now time for us to switch gears to South Africa, where the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is currently facing what can be described as the toughest test of his presidency so far, after the independent panel looking into the Pala Pala farm scandal found that there might be grounds to impeach him. The panel, in its 82-page report, found that President Ramaphosa may have contravened anti-corruption laws, violated the constitution, abused his power, and exposed himself to a situation involving a conflict between his official responsibilities and his private business. The controversial case involves the alleged theft of at least $580,000 in cash stashed into a sofa of President Ramaphosa's private Pala Pala game farm in February 2020. The panel also found that he may have played a role in trying to conceal the investigation.
Now, on the basis of these findings, Parliament, with a 2/3 vote in favour, could set in motion an impeachment process against Ramaphosa when it convenes on Tuesday. The president has denied any wrongdoing and has not been charged with any crime. However, the future of his presidency is in serious doubt. Take a listen to the response of the presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, to the latest development.
The president appreciates the enormity of this issue, what it means for the country, the stability of government. And as a result of that, he is still processing the report, but in that exercise, he's also engaging a number of role players and stakeholders. All options are on the table, but what is important is not so much the merits or the demerits of a particular option. What is important is choosing a path or a route that first and foremost is in the interest of the country, as I've said, with respect to the stability of government, as well as the stability of the country itself.
And now joining us to discuss this whole process, we have Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast, political analyst, and Themba Godi, president of the African People's Convention. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I'll start with you, Dr. Breakfast. While Magwenya and the presidency are still looking through the findings, can you please take us through the key findings of this independent panel that was headed by the former Chief Justice, Sandile Nkobo?
Well, I think the findings are simple and straightforward, namely that the president broke his oath of office, that he violated the constitution, and that he lied when he said that he is basically undertaking business that pays him, while when he was making a speech at the ANC conference in Mpumalanga, he indicated the exact opposite. So there is no juxtaposition between what he said and what is outlined in the constitution, that you cannot undertake paid business. So on that score, I think that makes room for the president to consider seriously resigning. I think one cannot turn a blind eye to these findings. They are quite serious and they're very straightforward in my view. I think the president, it would be better for him to resign by himself as opposed to going through the impeachment process, because that will hurt the ANC, but also it will hurt the country. We must bear in mind that the Constitutional Court made a ruling that in as much as there is a constitutional provision for impeachment, but at that time when Sholozi was facing a threat to his presidency, there were no guidelines. So the Constitutional Court recommended that the first step towards impeachment is to institute an independent panel, what has happened in this case of Pala Pala. And then the second step, I think, is to have Parliament looking at the findings and then making a call whether to vote against the president or not.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Breakfast. Now, Themba, what's your reaction to the findings of the independent panel that found that Ramaphosa may have contravened anti-corruption laws, violated the constitution, abused his power, and exposed himself to a situation involving a conflict between his official responsibilities and his private business? Is this an impeachable case?
Well, I think let's understand the process, which is that when any member of parliament presents a motion calling for the impeachment of the president and substantiating it, the first step, once the speaker accedes to that, is to establish this panel, which must look at the evidence or the information brought before it, and for it to make a finding. And once that finding has been made, the report is then presented to Parliament. Parliament has a right to accept or reject the report. If it rejects the report, then that's the end of the story. But if it accepts the report, then it must go ahead now and establish a parliamentary committee that can then drill into the issues identified by the panel and any other issues that might be relevant to the case. So as things stand, the findings of the panel, for me, that's not the end of the process. It's actually the second step of the process. However, a lot of the things that are in the public domain more have to do with politics than the actual legal process as set out in Parliament.
Okay, so I'll stay with you, Themba, and we're looking at the ANC elections. I mean, we've seen Jacob Zuma speaking. Right now, we're seeing different cases summing up for the president, Ramaphosa. How do you see this panning out for him?
Well, look, it could not have come at a worse time for him, because clearly the guilty finding by the panel has been pounced upon by his opponents within his party. Same way that him and his buddies pounced on findings and positions against the former president. It is in the nature of things. I think it will galvanize, it will give more energy to those who want him out. Well, we can't say what the outcome is going to be, but there is an array of forces against him. But once again, ANC conferences are less about principle than, as it appears, about money. So whether money will triumph again this time around or there is sufficient anger, we're not sure, but it definitely does have an impact on the conference coming.
Okay. Now, Dr. Breakfast, the president's spokesperson, Vincent Gbenga, said all options are on the table for President Ramaphosa. We heard it in the sound bites we played earlier. And I do recall that you said, you know what, President Ramaphosa should resign. So what will be the consequences of him staying and fighting?
Yeah, I think the president at the moment is weighing his options. But the challenge is that we must bear in mind that the ANC at the Zondo Commission, it was also on trial. The ANC has been affected by institutionalization of corruption, because corruption is not only a buzzword, but it is embedded within the ANC and also within state institutions. So if the ANC is dragging its feet in terms of its responsiveness, it might give an impression that it doesn't take the issue of corruption seriously. So the ANC has to act. But the problem is that I suspect that in the next meeting of the ANC, it's going to be a political battleground. It's going to be a platform of, politics of spectacles. I don't think that people will examine the findings objectively as they stand. I think they will argue along the lines of factionalism, because those who are vehemently opposed to the president have always wanted to use the findings that have been unveiled by the independent panel to take a swipe at the president and to justify why he must step down. So the proponents of Tumamina will look at what they are saying against that background. But at the same time, this is going to affect the economic performance of the country. I just heard that the rand has been affected. The market forces have responded negatively. And also, as the public, we are embroiled in these factional battles of the ANC that have nothing to do with us, actually, as the citizens of this country.
Okay, now, Themba, Opposition Democratic Alliance's leader, Johnson Houston, said he would table a motion in the National Assembly for a vote on the dissolution of the government and call for elections earlier. Now, as a member of the opposition, you are from the African People's Convention. What was your reaction to this?
No, well, look, I don't think that should be taken seriously. Those fellows are merely trying to find an angle on the issue, because remember, when the panel called for submission of evidence, either way, the DA did not participate, and actually the DA is very supportive of the president. So I don't see this happening. I don't see any party acceding to that. I just want to go back to the earlier question you asked about what happens if the president resigns. Remember, President Mbeki was forced to resign before the end of his term, and there was no investigation against him. There was nothing smelling of criminality against him, and the state and the country continued. President Zuma was also forced to resign, primarily for political reasons, not because there was a specific issue of criminality hanging over his head. He resigned and nothing happened. And here we have a president who is accused of violating his oath of office, of serious misconduct. And this spokesperson says we must consider the stability of the country. I think he's just spinning it. Nothing is going to happen in terms of the stability of the country. We are not South Sudan, far from it. Of course, it is the battle within the ANC and it affects the ANC. However, it is of interest to all of us as citizens of the country.
But permit me, sorry for butting in. The ANC, in its constitution, does have a step-aside rule that if there's an allegation against the head of the party and a sitting president, he should step aside. Yeah. And this allegation has been tabled through this report. So why is he not stepping aside?
Well, look, the step-aside rule is very controversial, even within the party itself.
Ace Magashule stepped aside because of allegations of corruption that were leveled against him, the former General Secretary of the African National Congress.
No, very true. That's why I'm saying it is controversial, because it is seen as being applied selectively. Remember, the president went to meet the integrity committee of his own party, whose findings determine whether you can be suspended, you can step aside or not. And he refused to answer questions and to open up. And nothing has happened to him. I think the point here is that the stepping aside of the president, and like you correctly point out, it's nothing out of the ordinary. Even within their own rules, they have it. And I would imagine that if they don't have an animal farm kind of situation, anyone who is affected should step aside and everything should continue as normal. However, my preliminary sense is that there's going to be a massive fight back. Some few hours ago, there was a meeting of the national leadership of the party. The meeting broke up. Officially, we were told that it was said, no, the National Working Committee must process this first before it comes to the NEC, whereas others are saying, well, the president was not even in the meeting himself. He was in Cape Town, and some were thinking, okay, maybe he's going to consult the Boers in Stellenbosch for further guidance. So it's going to be a serious challenge internally.
Okay, now, Dr. Breakfast, still looking at this fight back. President Ramaphosa is the leader of the ANC party. And aside this scuffle we're having, we have from Jacob Zuma, there's been a lot of dent on the ANC. Now, if President Ramaphosa does step aside or resign, is there anyone in the ANC that you think has the integrity and the charisma to steady the ANC ship?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. I think that is everyone's guess. My view is that the ANC has run out of good leaders. You hardly come across a leader of the ANC that is not affected by a scandal or a corruption.
Yeah, but Dr. Breakfast, people will mention names like Tito Mboweni and Naledi Pandor, the foreign minister. Are those not? Are they not names that have not been tainted?
I mean, Dr. Pandor is in her 70s. I mean, for crying out loud. Tito Mboweni walked away without finishing his term as a minister of finance. So how can it be that he becomes the president now? So even those names are questionable, unless they can pick it and choose a younger person who doesn't have a history of corruption to take over, of which I think the old guards will be vehemently opposed to that because they still want to hold on to power a bit longer.
Is this a plus for the opposition parties? Because right now you're seeing the party being rocked by corruption. I mean, how are the people seeing the ANC party? Dr. Breakfast.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, opposition parties, will take a strategic advantage to the weaknesses of the ruling party. They are not at fault. You can't blame them for that. Politics is about that. It's about outmaneuvering your opponents. So the opposition parties will take advantage of this situation in pursuit of their own agenda. And they are going to use this as a campaign in the build up to the upcoming general elections. I mean, we are going to have general elections just around the corner. And the possibility that the ANC can lose power is not far-fetched, especially in the light of, these findings, which speak to corruption.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Breakfast. Themba, before we wrap things up, you did talk about, South Africa being a constitutional democracy and the heavens won't fall if the president steps aside, that South Africa is not South Sudan. You've had the former president, Thabo Mbeki, step aside, former president Jacob Zuma resign before the end of his tenure. Now, observers are saying this process is a good one for South African democracy. How significant has this process been, in your view, before we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, I think, look, our democratic project is still unfolding. We are in uncharted waters because nothing like this has happened before. It is for the first time that a sitting president is facing this kind of allegations. So it is a test, especially to him, the president, who was very central to the writing of the very same constitution, and came to power on the promise of accountability, of transparency, of honesty, the very things that it appears that he is failing in. So if he's going to dig in because people around him who benefit from his presidency want him to continue, it will clearly indicate that, we still have a good document, so to speak, but in practice, we're still far from being perfect.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Dr. Ntsikelelo, Breakfast political analyst, and Themba Godi, president of the African People's Convention. It was a pleasure having you on the conversation. Thanks for your contribution and insight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is how we wrap up today's edition of The Conversation. In the first half, we dealt situations in Nigeria, and it seems like corruption is taking the front for today's conversation, where the president has put an accusing fingers on the state governors for looting local government funds. And we just finished conversations in South Africa, where it is likely that due to corruption and the farm scandal in South Africa, the Phala farm gate, the president is likely or not to resign in South Africa.
So your guess is as good as mine. Hopefully by the time we have the conversation again, we'll have a clearer picture. on developing situation, this very fast developing situation in South Africa. I'm Gbenga Aborowa. Thanks for being a part of the program.
And I am Rita Omodia. See you again next week.